Haley McNamara, thank you for being on Victory.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you again because you and I used to speak at conferences together, and I've got a great deal of respect for the work that you guys are doing at NCOSE, so thanks for being on.
Oh, thank you. So glad to reconnect with you, and we've got a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to learning. Yeah, so tell people who are watching right now who you are and who NCOSE is.
So I'm a vice president at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, and NCOSE, which because it's a mouthful, is a nonpartisan nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. that works to expose the links between all forms of sexual exploitation and abuse, because we realize that things like pornography and sex trafficking and violence against women and all these different forms of abuse overlap, intersect, reinforce one another at different times. And so, to build a world free from sexual exploitation and abuse, we need to recognize those links to inform policy and culture and a whole host of things. So, we do public policy work at the state and federal level. We have a law center that represents survivors against institutions facilitating abuse. We do corporate responsibility. So we're talking with corporations like Google and Instagram and others about what they could be doing to better address these issues. And of course, we're always working on education as well. So we're busy, but that's us in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, and y'all have been spearheading a lot of these great victories, which I want to ask you about. But I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask, but I'm 39. And I was thinking the other day that the amount of like sexual junk in kids' videos or videos aimed at families is significantly less than it was, say, in the 80s. Have you ever seen the movie Ghostbusters? The old first Ghostbusters?
Yeah, a while ago.
So I have like nostalgic memories of that. And so a couple of months ago, I thought, well, I'll watch it again on my own. And within the first, 10, 20 minutes, I don't know if you remember this, but you've got one of the Ghostbusters, I forget which one, who's a university professor who's trying to manipulate a female student into giving him oral sex. I don't know if you remember that. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. And I was just like, and that was the punchline, right? Because he got interrupted and he was like, ugh. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is so terrible. And so I think in some ways we're making progress, that sexual exploitation really, really, really isn't cool and shouldn't be laughed about. But anyway, tell us about some of the fantastic victories that you guys have helped accomplish.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that, because there is so much exploitation going on, but you're right that it's less normalized. People are realizing that this is something we need to stand up to, and everyone has a role to play in that. So we've been having a lot of victories and progress lately, especially with social media platforms, actually. So we've been going to them and talking about the need for just some basic safety standards for minors, especially. For example, we were meeting a couple years ago with some young girls who were unfortunately survivors of sex trafficking already at the age of 14 or 15 years old. And they were telling us about how they were essentially targeted, groomed, and sold through Instagram. And one of the main reasons why was because adult strangers were able to direct message them as minors on Instagram. And so we brought that news to the corporation themselves. And through a series of conversations, Instagram actually made a huge step forward in progress. And now they have a lot of safety settings for minors, including not allowing adult strangers to contact minors. And then TikTok heard about this because we started bringing it to TikTok and saying, if Instagram's doing this, can't you guys do something too? And they also started instituting a lot of improvements, including automating safety features to be turned on for minors on TikTok, and taking away some of the high-risk features for minors on TikTok, such as direct messaging or live streaming for users under a certain age. So there's certainly more that needs to happen there with all of these corporations. I don't think we'll ever be 100% happy. We're always talking to them about more that they could be doing. But we are seeing a lot of progress with mainstream corporations like that. And then we're also seeing a lot of progress in the awareness around the harms of sexual exploitation on pornography platforms as well. That's something that in the last couple of years has really gone to the next level. And I think we're approaching really a culture shift in how we're thinking about pornography platforms.
Yeah, God bless your patience in all of this, because I think you see the horror of it and you think, how the hell do you not see that this is inappropriate? But it's got to be an incremental approach with these companies, I'm sure. And then not just an incremental approach, but like congratulating them full-throatedly when they do make good decisions so that they can appear as hopefully what they wish to be, a more ethical company. I also know that NCOSE kind of was partly responsible or mostly responsible for, like, this is back a few years ago, but Hilton hotels and other big hotel chains removing pornography from their televisions. And I think you guys got McDonald's and Starbucks to start filtering their Wi-Fi. You helped get Google to remove pornographic ads from their app store. Am I right in all those?
Yes, and more. Actually,
keep going. We need good news, Haley.
Yeah, a recent update that happened with Google is, of course, with the pandemic, so much education moved online, and that actually became a bit of a money influx for Google because they have a lot of products that schools use, like tablets and Google Chromebooks, which are basically Google laptops that are often used in educational settings. And so all of these schools started purchasing these Google products specifically to use in online or distance learning. Unfortunately, none of these products had safety settings turned on. So they were purchased for children to use for education. No filters were turned on, and no safety settings. So we started hearing from parents about children who on these products started being exposed to hardcore pornography. Unfortunately, we even heard of one young boy who was doing some simple searches, trying to put together a homework assignment on slavery, and through Google Images was exposed to hardcore pornography on the school given device. So we brought this to Google, and so often with these kinds of conversations, you bring something and the first time the answer is no. The answer is there's nothing that can be done. It's a little bit
bureaucracy, yeah.
Yeah, to even have a problem with this. But we just kept bringing them stories from parents and from children who were experiencing harm. And thankfully, Google has changed their mind. So now all of these devices that are given for schools, for online learning, have Safe Search automatically turned on. Like some of these just very simple tools that for a school administrator or a teacher, it's too much of a burden to go through and change every single, safety setting on every single laptop that they're giving out. But Google, knowing who the end users are going to be, can just do some of these simple steps that make a really huge difference. So it's really encouraging to me, and I hope it's an encouragement to others, that if you just stand up and say something, even if sometimes the answer is no at the beginning, if you just keep bringing forward reason and survivors or people who've been impacted, people's minds change. And so often we're just seeing incredible victories come out of that.
So how is it that you put pressure on these companies? I'm just like a lonely little YouTuber. I feel like I have no power to contact Google. What are your strategies involved to get them to listen to you?
Well, funnily enough, our strategies really hinge on individuals taking action. So we have a campaign called the Dirty Dozen List. That's an annual activism campaign where we name 12 mainstream corporations that facilitate sexual exploitation or abuse. And we try to make it as easy as possible for people to take action. whether speaking out on social media and tagging the company, because these companies have PR people who are really watching that kind of thing. They actually really do care how they look on social media. Or we'll have some forms that people can fill out to very simply just send an email to the company. So there's a host of things like that. But really, if you just, and it's through those actions that doors open for conversations with these companies. And then with many of them, we're lucky to develop an ongoing relationship, and we're able to kind of check in every quarter and discuss things that are going well and things that are not going as well. But so many times, a policy improvement has come directly out of the fact that individuals were emailing and were contacting the company, asking them to make a difference. So really, it does come down to the individuals speaking up.
Yeah. How important is it that we publicly congratulate these companies when they do make a step in the right direction? Because I remember, and you correct me if my memory's off, but several years ago, Google's blogging platform, Blogger, decided to remove all pornographic websites from that blog hosting thing. And it wasn't long, there was such a stink made by the porn companies that they actually reinstituted or changed their mind. Am I getting that right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Well, but how important is it that we, congratulate them? Because I guess, like, it's easy to be a cynic and say, oh yeah, you've done that, but look at all this other stuff you haven't yet done. But I would imagine companies, well, are like human beings. They like to be told what they're doing right, and they respond accordingly.
Yes. And sometimes if someone does something right, and if you praise them for it and raise awareness about it, then a little bit holds them accountable to, not back away from it. But no, it's so important. And, sometimes you can win more with honey than with vinegar.
Vinegar,
sometimes
yes.
You a bit of both. But another thing that really has stood out to me with talking more with these companies is you hear Google, Instagram, TikTok, and they sound like these faceless mega corporations that they are, but there's also people who are working in that organization. And many of them are parents or know someone who is impacted by exploitation. And it might take a little bit to kind of crack that nut and speak to the individuals there, but they really do actually care at the end of the day a lot of the time. So that's one thing that we think is really important to realize, is that these corporations are manned by individuals, and there's a lot of progress that can be made by interacting with them that way.
One thing I'd like to see happen is airlines either filtering the pornographic content that comes through on mainstream television shows and movies these days, or at the very least a sort of screen protector that blocks. This is just absurd. It's just like, if you wanted evidence that our society doesn't care about or flat out hates children, this seems to me one thing that you'd point to, that we're strapping children in seats where they cannot get away, and pornographic material is being played on these flights. Have people brought that to your attention? Are you doing anything in that realm? I know you can't solve all the world's problems, but I am.
No, that is something that has come up. There's sort of two issues. One being the in-flight entertainment. There will often be, just graphic sex scenes with R-rated material that are played that can be visible with children sitting there. And then there's also the issue of people watching pornography on flights.
Is that really happening more and more? That just boggles my mind.
Unfortunately.
I think what I would do is I think I would very carefully pour my hot coffee on their device. That's absolutely. I think I would call them out. I would call the hostess, and then I would throw a cup of coffee on it. Anyway, that's what I'd do. What does NCOSE do?
It's pretty unreal that it has happened. And in the last number of years, it seems to have been happening more and more frequently, especially as people have, electronic devices that they're bringing on to flights with them. And unfortunately, a lot of the time when someone does raise it as a problem, they'll contact the stewardess or flight attendant. The flight attendants aren't trained on what to do. and they don't know what the policy is. So there's actually been a number of instances where someone raises this issue because someone's sitting next to them, and the flight attendants say that they can't do anything about it.
Whew.
So
Crazy.
thankfully, United Airlines, after we've been contacting them, has updated their policies. So it is officially against the policy to watch pornographic materials on their flights. It seems like a low bar, but every bit counts. So
Absolutely.
we still want more airlines to just make that policy crystal clear. And we still, at the same time, think these airlines need to do better with training just to ensure that they have the appropriate
Yeah.
response. Like
So would something we could possibly do right now, if we're on Twitter or something, is to tweet at Delta and ask them why it's not in their policy that people may not watch pornographic movies from their devices. Would that be a good idea?
Yes, go for it. At Delta.
Yes, that's insane. Yeah. Okay, so I've spoken on pornography a great deal. As you know, I've written books on the topic, but I'll be honest, it's been a couple of years since I've really kind of come back to this area. That's part of why we started this podcast, so I could start addressing this again. So I think I'm out of the loop. Help me understand what's going on with Pornhub and, just there you go. As much as you want to share.
Yes, so there's so much happening, actually. And it's overall really encouraging, but it's because, unfortunately, some really dark things have been uncovered. So in really 2020, more and more survivors have started speaking out whose exploitation was uploaded to Pornhub. For those who aren't as familiar, Pornhub essentially operates like YouTube, where pretty much anyone could upload a video to the platform. And then Pornhub made money off of ads and user data and some other things like that. Unfortunately, a unsurmountable amount of abusive content was being uploaded to Pornhub. Everything from filmed sexual assaults, child sexual abuse materials, otherwise known as child pornography, filmed sex trafficking, and also just other forms of image-based sexual abuse. So maybe a video that was taken from and shared without consent, for example. And survivors have started speaking up about this, especially one brave survivor, Rose Kalimba, was 14 years old when she was sexually assaulted, and that video ended up on YouTube. She contacted, not on YouTube, on Pornhub. Mm-hmm. She contacted Pornhub, asked them to take it down, and they didn't, and they let it remain for a significant amount of time. And unfortunately, that kind of story has happened again and again and again. But the survivors are speaking up, and that's always what leads to change. And so in due course, the New York Times actually published an expose on this, and in an op-ed called The Children of Pornhub. And I recommend that everyone go and read it if you haven't yet. It's quite significant. And
when was that? When did that come out?
That was in, I believe, December 2020. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so that happened, and it really sparked something really significant. So in response, credit card companies like MasterCard and Visa, at least temporarily, stopped processing for Pornhub. Now, all in the same time, our organization had been reaching out to Visa and MasterCard and other credit cards, letting them know about the abuse and crimes, really, that were being facilitated by Pornhub and MindGeek, which is the owner of Pornhub and a host of other pornography platforms. So we'd been calling on them. We'd been meeting with them, bringing survivors even to do briefings.
Gosh, I don't know how you do that without wanting to just punch everybody in the balls who works there. Google, it's like, I mean, they have a lot of shady practices, but at least you feel like their primary goal, I think it's fair to say, isn't sexual exploitation. But it's like working with Pornhub or trying to work with them is like trying to work with Satan. Like, how can we make things a little better? How can you be less evil? That must be really tough to go into one of those meetings.
Oh yeah. Well, we're mostly going to the credit card companies and letting
Okay.
them know about the, yeah, letting them know
Okay,
about
so
the,
you're not meeting with Pornhub.
right. No,
Okay. Sorry.
no,
Keep going.
I think I would be too mad. I think I
Yeah,
would
that's
be
what I
too
mean.
mad to do that. But no, but so we realized, seeing all of these crimes that were happening on Pornhub, and other pornography platforms too, we want to take away some of the mainstream support for
Yes.
these corporations
That's like the
because
gasoline, right? Take it out of the engine. Let it crash.
exactly. Exactly. And these companies wouldn't knowingly partner with sex trafficker, wouldn't knowingly partner with a company that's goal is to facilitate sexual exploitation. So we just are
At the very least, because it would be bad for business. Like, even for those cynics out
exactly.
there who are like, oh, come on. It's like, well, yeah, even if it's just it's a bad business move.
So yes, it's not good for your brand at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So we've been reaching out, yeah, to these credit card companies and also to some companies that have done advertisements on Pornhub, letting them know about the documented reality of exploitation happening on that platform. And in the middle of all of this as well, I mean, we're not the only ones speaking out. There's the survivors are speaking out, and
Good for them.
different NGOs are speaking out. One, Exodus Cry, launched the Trafficking Hub campaign. So anyone who's really interested in this topic, you can go online and search the hashtag Trafficking Hub, and you'll see so many tweets. So they launched a petition to shut down Pornhub, and it reached over 2 million signatures, which
Wow.
is really significant. And they are not mincing their words. They're saying, "Shut this down.
Yeah.
Pornhub is a
It's
crime
not
scene."
salvageable. It's wicked. Yeah.
So all of this momentum is building. Then the New York Times publishes this expose. Then in December of that year, Pornhub says, okay, we're going to change things. We're not going to allow people to download materials, and we're only going to allow verified users to upload content. The
Who did you
problem
say this?
is,
Pornhub said this? Okay.
mhm, Pornhub said, we'll clean up house. The problem is that they've lost all of their credibility, and even saying that they would only allow verified users to upload content is not going to keep the content on there safe or free from exploitation. They, in fact, in the past have verified users that were uploading child sexual abuse materials. And they're not doing any kind of age or consent verification for the people depicted in these videos, not in any significant way. They might say, check a box that you're 18 and check a box that you're consenting, but they're also not checking to see if, well, this user account could be a sex trafficker who is uploading videos of victims. And Pornhub has no idea. None of these pornography platforms have any idea about what's actually going on in the room, not to mention the fact that pornography is inherently exploitive.
Yeah.
So they tried to clean up house, but it's just a PR move. It's not really anything that's going
Mm-hmm.
to make any difference. So Visa, MasterCard, and Discover cut ties with Pornhub. And then something really exciting happens because Pornhub is actually owned by MindGeek, which is based in Canada. And Canadian Parliament called in MindGeek executives to testify before an ethics committee about the exploitation and abuse happening on their platform. It was like an unprecedented step in the global recognition of the exploitation happening on pornography platforms, and led to some really fascinating and disturbing testimony, including discovering that for about 10 years, Pornhub was not reporting child sexual abuse materials that were uploaded onto its website, not reporting that to the police even when they
Monsters.
learned that it was happening. So yeah, so I mean there's been so much happening.
Is it fair to say that Pornhub empire is beginning to crumble? And if so, what can we do to hasten that crumbling?
I do believe it's beginning to crumble. You know, the MasterCard is no longer operating with them. and Unilever and Kraft Heinz and Roku, all mainstream companies that had connections to Pornhub in one way or another, have cut ties, distanced themselves. At the same time, probably the most impactful thing is survivors speaking out, but also turning to civil litigation. So there are, by my estimation right now, around 200 survivors of abuse who are actively suing Pornhub or MindGeek for facilitating videos of their exploitation, which is incredibly significant. Actually, our law center is involved in some of those lawsuits as well, including defending one plaintiff, a Jane Doe, who's just 16 years old when she was drugged and she was sexually assaulted. So this was, child sexual abuse material in addition to filmed sexual assault. And it was uploaded. MindGeek reviewed, categorized, tagged, and disseminated the images and videos depicting this person's assault, and it was viewed over 2,400 times. There's no attempt to verify, age or identity of this person. And that's just one person's story, and there's at least 200 others who not only have experienced that, but are taking the steps to try to sue Pornhub and MindGeek.
So what could this look like? What's the best case scenario for our side?
Best case scenario is they go completely bankrupt, which is which is in progress actually. In the last couple months, they've fired some of their top executives and they've laid off about 70% of their staff. So
Wow.
we're seeing them starting to go under. But we won't be done with them. We need the entire industry really to crumble, especially because it's just very basic common sense that there's no way to verify the age or consent of anyone on these platforms, and no one's doing a good job of doing that. So I think we're on our way towards that, and people can really support this by just continuing to speak about it and raise awareness, and put pressure on any mainstream corporations that are supporting the infrastructure for pornography platforms, because at this point, we know enough about how they operate, and we have seen enough survivors step forward to know that you can't make this a sanitary industry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't. If someone's watching and they are a survivor, or maybe they've had their abuse uploaded to Pornhub, can they contact NCOSE? How could they do that?
Yes. So if you go to endsexualexploitation.org, you'll see information for our law center, and you can contact us through there. And whether our law center can help you or connect you with other resources, we're more than happy to do that.
Law is like a teacher, and it does help influence public opinion. And I'm shocked. I would never have believed back when I was, say, 16 years old, that one day you would have people like Kanye West, Pamela Anderson, is it Billie Eilish? I'm a dad. Mm-hmm. Help me out. Yeah. Okay. James Hetfield, Chris Rock. Like, this is Terry Crews. I mean, this is beautiful to see, because these people really do influence culture, and if they stand up and speak out about this, it's terrific. What are we seeing right now that's good in the kind of cultural space of maybe movies or individuals who are speaking out about this?
Yeah, well, exactly as you said, more celebrities are starting to feel comfortable with opening up about their own personal experiences. So I think that, and the harms of pornography, I think that's really significant. Also, just awareness of sex trafficking and sexual abuse has really increased in the last number of years, both through the Me Too movement, through conversations around Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. And I think now with the pornography abuse, that's becoming clear. And more people are starting, there's a bit of an emerging field in the idea of image-based sexual abuse. So that's maybe sexually explicit content that has been shared by a partner or ex-partner, that has been recorded without consent, such as spy cams or hidden cameras or filmed sexual assaults as well, and or hacked images, which has impacted a lot of celebrities as well as a lot of individuals. And we're seeing more awareness around that. I predict within the next year to 2 years, that's going to be a really significant part of the current conversation, because we're seeing survivors really speaking out on that. There's actually some legislation that's been introduced called the Protect Act, which calls for robust age and consent verification for platforms that host explicit content. And over 300 survivors of image-based sexual abuse have signed that letter just within this last week, have signed a letter recommending that legislation and
In
calling
the
for
last
it.
week.
Mhm. So this is,
Crikey.
we're on the front end, but I think it's another way that we're seeing, again, survivors often are leading the way and really helping us to pave a path forward and raise awareness.
This is such a breath of fresh air. I think one of the reasons I had to just distance myself from this conversation a few years ago is I was speaking to like 70,000 teenagers a year and college students on this topic, and just being immersed in that is it takes a toll. It's a dark place, and it's a sad place. But hearing things like this really does give people hope. How do you? Is it these victories that kind of keep you hopeful, or do you find yourself getting fatigued over all these horror stories, and how do you deal with that?
Definitely. It's very dark. And especially when we're talking with people who are impacted. Obviously there's survivors who are exploited by the pornography industry or have their exploitation uploaded onto pornography websites. But I also think especially of children exposed to this content as victims as well of the pornography industry. And especially people in my generation, millennials who so often were exposed so young and maybe now have compulsive problems with it or have been harmed in relationships by partners who have problems with pornography usage. It's very dark and it's very prevalent, but I think that we are seeing so much progress, and that's really what is keeping me in the fight, because pornography is such a ubiquitous experience in some way or another in my generation and younger generations. It's starting to lose its taboo and people are speaking about it. And when people start speaking about it, they start hearing the harms from their own perspective, from their friends' perspectives. And then some people are learning about the research about the harms of pornography. And then there are these activism campaigns, this legislation progress with corporations as well, which is really encouraging. And I do believe that we are really approaching some cultural tipping points on this topic, even internationally. So internationally, Germany, actually, a high court in Germany just recently allowed legislation to move forward, calling for some pornography platforms to be banned from the country if they don't enact age restrictions, some age gating, keep children off of pornography platforms. It's a very simple idea, and Germany's pursuing that. France is pursuing that. The UK has been pursuing that for years. It's taking a little time there. But it's an idea that's not going away. That
I think part. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think you're right. It is a very simple idea, and I think that the what do you call it? The porn industry or the porn apologists have for so long convinced us, or have tried to convince us, that if we're opposed to porn, it's because we're just against sex, that we're sexually repressed, that this is a religious issue. But as the data and the studies pile higher, and we realize, no, this is like a public health crisis, that we start to realize that exposing children to pornography is abusing children. And to take that lightly, or to say, I don't know, to try to make an argument for why that's acceptable from a libertarian point of view, seems to me to be just intellectually bankrupt.
Yeah, I don't think you can make that argument if you have any exposure to the research on the harms of pornography, or if you've just talked with people who've been exposed to it from a young age. So it's really encouraging to see international legislators having the courage also to step up and introduce legislation like that, support legislation like that. And, and there's so much more. I know that there's legislators in Hungary, in Colombia, in Spain and other places that are actively searching for the research and looking for legislative solutions. And maybe not all of the solutions need to be legislative. It might depend on the country, the culture, and the context. But certainly, whether it's legislation, corporate responsibility, public awareness around the harms, and which is really significant as well. All those things really are making progress. So it's a dark subject, but I really do actually have so much hope. I think that we're getting there bit by bit.
Yeah. And it's a dark subject precisely because the human person is so good, like, and I know you know this, and our listeners probably know this, but like, if the human person did not have intrinsic dignity, dignity not based on what he or she does, not a dignity that's bestowed from government, like, then we couldn't talk about the exploitation of the human person. No one talks about exploiting paper clips or washing machines, right? Like, the reason pornography is evil is precisely because the body is sacred and demands our reverence. So I'm so glad you're in this fight. Hey, other than supporting NCOSE financially, which feel free to talk about that, how can we get behind again, for those watching, NCOSE stands for the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. What more can we do? How can we join you in this fight?
So you can go to dirtydozenlist.com and you can take some really easy actions by emailing these corporations, sending out pre-written tweets. We make it so easy. In 5 minutes, you can take 10 actions or more. And they do really make a difference. So that's one way. And another way is talking with people in your life about these issues. So whether you're on our website or others' websites, reading their blogs and then sharing them with friends is always really helpful. And also contacting your state legislators. We have legislation going throughout the country on exploitation issues, from sex trafficking to pornography, such as some legislation for ensuring that filters are turned on for minors on their smartphone devices. That's a very simple thing that legislators can pursue. Or even things like declaring pornography a public health hazard, which is something that 16 states in the US have already done so. And by the way, a committee, so not the full thing, but a committee in the Council of Europe has also called pornography a public health hazard. That's also language that's being pursued internationally. So you can get involved legislatively as well. And if you're passionate about that, just contact us and we'll be happy to set you up with plenty to do.
Yeah, God bless you. NCOSE.com, is that right? Or .org? Or?
EndSexualExploitation.org.
Oh, I got that completely wrong, so I'm really glad I asked. All right, Haley, God bless you. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.